and how much the focus of the government is to suppress women. They're so brave, they're still not wearing hijab, and then they started like hearing about the consequences, and still people doing that. So that bravery of women in Iran, I think specifically was the byproduct and the result of Mahsa Amini.
Do you want to talk about Mahsa Amini?
No, we can. No,
Or
definitely.
later
We
call.
still
Okay.
should. Yeah, we still should talk about it. And I think, do you have like any specific question
Well, I was just
about it?
what I'd be curious about is first of all, who was she, right? Who was she? How did her death rate inspire kind of this movement for people who maybe don't know? Because plenty of people listening, they might know who Masa Amini is, but many people might also not know who that person is.
I actually like that question because I think it's a question that I want to think about after 2 years of that uprising. If you were asking me who was Mahsa Amini 2 years ago, I was probably like really stimulated by like what the news wants her to be. Um, but what I truly think was Mahsa Amini was again that w one bold, unrealistic, like needle that burst a lot of like again newer wave of population in Iran about the true color of this government. Uh, I think Mahsa Amini and the Ukrainian airplane that I don't know if you're familiar with that
No, what
incident.
was the Ukrainian airplane?
So that happened. I need to check the dates to be precise, but 2 years before that, so the Iranian regime, by mistake, they actually shoot a missile to a passenger plane from the Ukrainian airplane, and there were like a lot of just Iranian students, citizens in that plane, and then for a very long time they denied it. And then finally they kind of like they actually saw that they couldn't like hide the truth. So they actually went public and yeah, I never really actually acknowledge or even apologize properly. Nothing. It was just still very tragic, very painful. So I think, yeah, the Mahsa Amini and how things, how what the main thing that happened, and then the media coverage and how much it got, just enough space to become public worldwide, I think was a very unique thing that happened in Iran after the revolution. Um, and just I feel like with Mahsa Amini and with the Ukrainian plane incidents, I see one thing in common in both of these events, that the people that actually got hurt was very similar to us. So we could like feel that this could be me. Like about Mahsa Amini, every single time whatever that I was like hearing from like more details, and not only her, uh, after that, all the victims of the uprisings, with every single person, we could relate. It was from our generation, it was people with the same hopes, goals, even values. So it was like feeling like we are missing it, like losing a sister or a close friend. So yeah, this is like the emotional impact of Mahsa Amini on me personally, because when I left Iran, one of the reasons that I was actually very determined to not live in Iran was because I didn't want to choose the path of being a social activist or a political activist. But I cared, like I couldn't not care. So I was like, I cannot be in this in-between world of I'm not an activist, not actually doing anything, but at the same time, this is like taking a lot of toll out of my day-to-day life. So I left the country. I was not like following any news, barely was like could even like sit in a political or social conversations that my parents were having until the Mahsa Amini. Because then I was like, this is not political. This is just I cannot just be silent. And I did my part as much as I could.
And just to recap for people who didn't know, what happened with Mahsa? Like, what happened to her? Why did she become this symbol? Like,
So yeah, that morality police that we were talking about it. So she's visiting Iran from sorry, visiting Tehran from her hometown. And this morality police, they arrest her. They think that she's not wearing her hijab properly. And under custody, apparently there's some physical uh, engagement happens between the officials and her, and she's being pushed based on some of the footages that came out. She's being pushed and get a concussion, and that concussion leads to some serious damage that she loses like her conscious for I think like few days, and then she passes away. And this whole thing was kind of captured and was on the news. And yeah, people were just waiting to see what is gonna happen. No one could believe that she has actually died under the custody of the police in Iran.
to this point, as since you were in the US when all of this was happening, and more just we'll say broadly when you were in the US, how did you feel amongst maybe not the either international students or Americans or all of them, how people perceived you as someone from Iran? You said there was a sense of like, oh, women from Iran are seen as heroes or whatnot. Did you find people were generally pretty educated about that, or at least that sentiment, or were a lot of people not very knowledgeable, or they viewed it as like, oh, Iran, we don't like that country, that's a bad country?
Mhm.
Or was it sort of a range of like different people had different views on things?
So, if I want to zoom out a little bit about the perception of the world, especially because, as I mentioned, I traveled a lot when I was a kid and throughout like different stages of my own life. Like as a high school girl, going and visiting the Western cultures, and then I moved to the United States. So I think there was like interesting change in terms of what people think about Iran. So the first time that I was like talking around the age of 18 to like people from England or other countries, they couldn't even differentiate Iran from Iraq. So I had to like actually pronounce that, oh, this is with N, not like Iraq, and then explain that we speak Persian. And then, you know, I personally don't get offended because there are like so many countries that I even don't know about them, and I feel like considering that I have traveled a lot, I should know, but I don't. But yeah, I always like tell them that yeah, if I see a person from Saudi Arabia, we need to speak English with each other. I can read their language, but we cannot talk. This the same language. So that was like one phase that people didn't know about Iran even. And then we had the first crazy president, Ahmadinejad,
Ahmadinejad,
and
yep, I remember him.
yeah.
Yep.
So he kind of like made us famous, but not in a way that you would enjoy. But a lot of people started actually knowing Iran. And yeah, that image was kind of like hard to hear, engage with, not feel offended because they were directly associating whatever that he was saying in these like all official big platforms to you, and they were like nonsense. And then I feel like there was a period of time that not many people were talking about Iran, but somehow the culture of Iran, and I think artists, filmmakers played a big role. There were a like big wave of Iranian actresses, especially actors like a female artist moved out of Iran and started creating work that was presented in like public settings, and they were not in a political. political environment. They were in cultural and art scenes and platforms. And I think it was like that around that point when you were talking about Iran, everybody was like, oh yeah, Persian kebab or the stews, food, rug, even cat. So you're sort of like hearing things that were a little bit less intense and you could like have an easier conversation. And then after Mahsa Amini, I think all of that journey of like Iran becoming a more known country in the world um, also shifted, and maybe this time again more dominant towards the women, and just acknowledging that how much the women in Iran are powerful despite of the all the budget and how much the focus of the government, first of all, is to suppress women, like their energy. Like they have a police for them. Like half of the country are women, and they're like this is scared of the women of their own country, so they have police for them. And then wow, they're like coming out, they're so brave, they're still not wearing hijab despite all of that. And then they started like hearing about the consequences of not wearing and covering your hijab, and still people doing that. So that bravery of women in Iran, I think specifically was the byproduct and the result of Mahsa Amini
Yeah.
uprising.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I'm thinking about from my perspective.